Secretary, please read.
Assembly Bill 953 by Assemblymember Weber, an act relating to racial profiling.
Senator Mitchell.
Thank you very much. In California and around the nation, the recent deaths of numerous people of color at the hands of law enforcement has given rise to heightened public concerns about the fairness policing, particularly in challenged communities. Clearly, the vast majority of police officers are noble public servants who perform dangerous jobs with dedication, honor, and integrity. Again, those aren't the officers that are in question. Let me give you some recent statistics from a poll. 55% of Californians and 85% of African Americans in California believe that African Americans and other minorities do not receive equal treatment in the criminal justice system. 71% of California voters believe that young black men are most likely to be discriminated against by police. 67% of California voters, therefore, support the content of this bill. Racial and identity profiling significantly contributes to this lack of confidence in our system of justice. It occurs when officers stop, search, seize property from, or interrogate a person without evidence of any criminal activity. Profiling stems not only from traditional notions of discrimination, but also unconscious bias and negative stereotypes held by officers, often with good intention. However, right now, profiling persists in California because our understanding of the problem is limited to anecdotal accounts from victims and limited data from a mere few of California's 605 law enforcement agencies. The only way to move from a discourse about profiling that is led by rhetoric and anecdotes to one built upon rational, evidence-based policing strategies that allay community concerns is to collect basic information about police-community interactions. So the purpose of this bill would not only satisfy this void, but also modernize California's prohibition against profiling so that it aligns with guidelines recently adopted by the Federal Department of Justice and the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. According to the LAO, this reform is necessary because California's current definition of profiling is over-vague and law enforcement agencies have resisted following it. Furthermore, pursuant to recommendations by the Police Executive Research Firm and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing of the U.S. Department of Justice, this bill would create a racial and identity profiling advisory board. As a multi-stakeholder group, the board would bring diverse voices and experts to the table, including social scientists, policing experts, and representatives of law enforcement, civil rights organizations, the legislature, and the governor, and challenged communities to develop solutions for curbing profiling and positively advancing police-community relations. Through these reforms, AB 953 would place California on a trajectory that improves the relationship of trust between law enforcement agencies and the communities they are sworn to protect. It would also help ensure that the constitutional promise of equality is met. I'd like to note that the bill has taken a substantial amount of amendments responding to the concerns of law enforcement by significantly reducing the data entry points required to be collected. We've also eased the implementation of the data collection component of the bill by incorporating a phase-in, starting with the largest agencies reporting by 2019 and the smallest by 2023. AB 953 would improve law enforcement community relations by seeking to prevent the harmful and unjust practice of racial and identity profiling and promote equal protection for all Californians. I ask for your aye vote. I know.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Members, debate or discussion? Senator Stone.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I really appreciate the comments from the senator from Los Angeles that made the comment that a majority of our law enforcement officers are great people that put their lives on the line every day to protect us. My concern is that while we want to do everything we can to encourage trust between police departments and sheriff's departments and public safety officials and the public, I don't believe that AB 953 is the right approach. Because while I understand we want to stop racial profiling and instigating stops, what this bill is actually doing is it's actually enhancing racial profiling, because an officer is going to have to stop and he's going to have to take into consideration somebody's race because he's got to go back to his office and file reports that are going to have to go to quarterly to the Attorney General's office for tabulations. It could result in quotas, you know, when somebody is pulling over one race more than another and wants to balance things out. It's going to be very costly for police departments and sheriff's departments to implement this because an officer is going to be spending an abundant amount of his time doing paperwork rather being on the streets and doing community-oriented policing. I want to do everything I can to improve trust between our constituents and police departments throughout not only California but throughout the United States. But I think an approach like this that actually encourages racial profiling and actually codifies it and memorialize it into reports that go to the Attorney General, I think is the wrong approach. And for those reasons, I recommend a no vote on AB 953.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Senator Lara?
Thank you, Mr. President, members. I also rise in support of this bill and also agree with my colleagues that we have the vast majority of our public safety officers are well-intentioned and hardworking people who do a great job in our communities. But today, I think our country is at a critical point in the conversation about equality, causing a difficult, uncomfortable, but necessary dialogue about race relations in our country. This bill brings to light such a discussion about racial profiling, but prejudice is all around us. All you have to do is turn on your TV, watch the news, or pick up your newspaper. We hear, presidential candidates vilifying an entire segment of our population because they weren't born in the U.S., or about the inspiring Black Lives Matter empowerment movement in our community that is demanding their rightful place in our amazing country. We have continually seen over the course of the past few years images of African-American men and sometimes young boys whose lives ended because of an inaccurate bias about who they might be based on how they're dressed or who they hang out with. I don't believe that these are incidents, but rather symptoms of a systematic problem that continues to perplex us today. The time is now for us to focus, to work together on combating racism. I think we've seen, now where I think we're at a tipping point when we talk about race relations in our country, where folks now seem to think it's okay to vilify groups of people. And so as we have these discussions, I think it's important for us to have them. I think it's important for us to kind of reflect on who we are as a country, but you also see what's happening around the world, what's happening in France and Germany, what's happening in Syria. And, it is kind of perplexing to think about the status of where we are as a world and as a country. But I think it's important for us to know where people stand. I think it's important for us to know how you feel about people who are different than you, because that's the only way we get to the healing process. And I think this bill does a good job of trying to get us there, to have that dialogue. We've never been very, accustomed of talking about, race in this country. And I know it's difficult. And while we talk about immigrants in this country, I know it's not easy, but I think it's important for us, especially to start that dialogue here in California, the most diverse state in our union. And for our fellow legislators that are across the country, I always tell them, pay attention to what's happening in California. California is coming to a neighborhood near you. Don't repeat the mistakes that we are making here. But also, let's work together to ensure that we accept our differences, but that we get to the healing, which is where we want to get to. And so as it is important for us to, celebrate our differences, we know that some people are not okay with that. But let's get to where we need to be, and that's to where we actually heal and we work together as a country and as a state and as a world. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lara. Senator Anderson?
Senators, I disagree with racial profiling. I think it's absolutely wrong. I don't think we should be doing it. I would want to point out at this time that our analysis shows that this bill is going to cost on a year-over-year basis about $8 million. And, I can't help but think about the MCO tax and some of the other things, in that knowing that poor children are going to go without health care because we don't have enough funds to do it, And I would offer an alternate viewpoint. We've already seen on body cameras a terrific dividend. We've seen in some of the early numbers that complaints against police officers has gone down significantly in San Diego. We've seen that poor outcomes have been reduced considerably. They're not using nearly as much force as they were before. I'd like to give body cameras a chance to work. See, I think we can accomplish this goal. Once we deploy all the body cameras, I think we'll have a stunning effect on people that choose to racially profile. And when I balance the $8 million a year, and I think that we can still get there, but through another method, I want to give body cameras a chance to work. I want to give them an opportunity to be, maybe we could speed up the rollout of those body cameras and achieve the same goal, and then we'd have $8 million more to put towards taking care of health care for the poor. I don't want to use that as an excuse because I think profiling is outrageous and it shouldn't be done. But because of the early positive responses we're getting off of body cameras, I want to give body cameras a chance to fully address the issue. And hopefully we'll never have to come to this bill because we'll have the evidence from body cameras. I urge a no vote.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Members, any further debate or discussion? Senator Nielsen.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I have to vote no as well. Racial profiling is bad. There's no doubt about it. And I don't think that there's any question where there have been examples that those have been disclosed to the public, and those officers who did that have been disciplined. The issue with the bill here, it goes way beyond that in terms of the amount of information an officer is going to have to be providing. That's going to have to then be analyzed and presented in a formal way. It uses the term implicit bias. You know, what does that mean? Are we making a presumption? Is that our next step? That when an officer comes upon some individual in a designated class, that it is a presumed bias that that person was stopped? I think that's the path that this can lead us to. And again, I believe it's going too far. And most assuredly, it is another example of our officers who were sworn and trained to protect the public, us, our property. Now, when they do that, they're going to have to be tabulating data and thinking about reports to be made, analyzing the scene at the moment, which for them must be secured by the moment, responded to by the second. And if they've got their minds on other things, at how am I going to report the data about this person that I stopped, that removes the small margin, that small edge, that thin blue line for our law enforcement professionals. There are other ways, more narrow ways, and more sure ways to accomplish the purpose of this bill.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. Senator Pan.
Thank you, Mr. President, members. I stand in support of this bill. And, you know, I agree with everyone who spoke before that. I believe that, you know, our law enforcement, public safety officials work very hard. They're doing their best. They often have to work in very difficult circumstances. They are, you know, the thin blue line. And at the same time, I would say is that none of us should be afraid of data, especially data that helps us better describe and define issues that are affecting the relationship between communities and law enforcement. I think it's something that will empower both community and law enforcement. We actually want to be sure our police officers have the tools, and the sheriffs and so forth, that law enforcement has the tools and the information they need to actually figure out how we're going to improve our protocols and our systems. And that's really what this bill's about. It's not about, I mean, it's not about saying that someone's doing something bad or wrong. It's about saying that we could do better. And you can't do that unless you actually have the data. We clearly do have an issue and a problem here in our community and our society in terms of relationship between certain communities and the police and law enforcement. And I think that the best way to resolve those is actually to be able to make policy based on good facts, not by saying there's a few bad apples, we just find some way to get rid of them, but by systematically looking at this and presuming that most everyone is actually trying to get to a solution, is trying to do their job in the best way. And the best way we're going to get there is by actually getting essential data, which I think is what's in this bill, to try to achieve that purpose. So I'm pleased to support this bill because I believe that's something that's going to help both law enforcement and our community to get to a place that's going to help keep our community safer and make our law enforcement officers more effective, efficient, and hopefully also keep them safer as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pan. Senator Bates?
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think the comments regarding racial profiling have been strong enough. It's been an abomination on our society for decades. I do think that we need to recognize that it's getting better. Folks, I was a social worker during the Watts riots back in the 60s, and I know the devastation emotionally of that community during that time. What we have before us today, however, is problematic for me because we're putting data collection in front of addressing a real crisis that we have at the moment, and that's in our health care. And spending $4 million this year, $8 million the next year, and then approximately $15 million within 5 years to collect data seems to be out of order in terms of the priorities we should be addressing in this legislative session. So regretfully, I will oppose this, but I want my colleagues to know it is really about addressing priorities in this session and putting something like this on our work program, but something that can be delayed while we address what are a terrible crisis affecting the people of our state. I ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Senator Bates. Any further debate or discussion? Seeing none, Senator Mitchell, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd be happy to. There's so many points to attempt to address. Where will I begin? I guess I'll begin at the beginning. Sacramento native, academician, author, Dr. Cornel West penned a book 25 years ago now, and the title was Race Matters. And I would argue that that book title is as relevant today as our experience 50 years ago with the Watts Rebellion, as it was based on the Attorney General's report just this week, based on the reality of the 1,000 Californians who lost their lives at the hand of law enforcement between 2008 and 2012. 20% were African American. 20% in a state whose overall African American population is under 6%. So I'm not sure if it's getting better or not. 25 years ago, when this body considered the issue of driving while black, some of you may remember, the number one issue, an argument for not supporting the bill then, was lack of data, that it was anecdotal. Well, that was before the proliferation of cell phone cameras, where, thanks to Senator Lara's bill, we now have the right to record our interactions with police, for many of us, for our own safety and protection in our communities. So I'm not sure if it's getting better. When the Attorney General estimates that 17% of all arrests in the state of California are young black males. Again, the African American population in the state is under 6%. I am not sure that it's getting better. It would be appropriate from my perspective to focus solely on the fiscal aspects of the bill if that were going to drive every aspect of our conversation in this body. So how do we collectively identify what should be a priority and what's not? Is it a priority to the 20% of the 1,000 lives lost that we prioritize their life? When we talk about law enforcement taking an oath to protect and serve, that's absolutely true, as do we as sitting members of this body. What those oaths don't include, what our training doesn't include, is an acknowledgement of our own racial bias, all of which we all have. It's human nature. So to suggest that an oath taken to protect or preserve somehow erases a lifelong of racial bias is naive at best. $8 million estimate, I appreciate that. But we should compare that to the expense, the potential expense on the other end. Case in point, just yesterday, the state of Maryland agreed to pay the family of the victim, gentleman who lost his life at the hands of law enforcement, $5.6 million over 2 years. So you could either look at it as an investment in humanity, an investment in data collection, which is where some argue where we're supposed to start the process, because the cell phone images, the real life experiences of people of color apparently aren't enough to validate policy changes around body cameras or anything else. So we've been told that our life experience isn't enough. So we come back with an AB 953 to say, well, let's collect data. Let's spend more time validating what people of color live every day. So we'll collect data. But now we don't want to pay for the data collection either. So I'm not sure when we will move beyond the rhetoric of our commitment to a racial utopia, to setting policies to create equity in the experience of the lives of people of color in the great state of California. If not data collection, then what? I heard colleagues talk about their commitment to creating open lines of communication between community and police. What does that look like? I've not seen other examples of legislation that gives us alternatives to debate on this floor or vote upon. I haven't seen it. Perhaps in January, those bills will be introduced. In the meantime, we have before us AB 953, which is an appropriate first step in, as the LAO suggests, defining what racial profiling is so we know what to measure. In years past, in an effort to have this very sensitive conversation, the language has been watered down, influenced largely by law enforcement, who perhaps didn't want to be held accountable. Well, the data that we have thus far shows that communities of color, African American men and women, Latino men and women continue to have a higher interaction with law enforcement, often unsubstantiated by their actions. The time has come to have a clear conversation with law enforcement about what we as a society will no longer accept, and that's racial profiling by those who indeed take an oath to protect and serve all of us fairly and equally. With that, I ask for your aye vote on AB 953.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. Bates. No. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. No. Block. Aye. Cannella. No. De Leon. Aye. Fuller. Gaines. No. Galgiani. Glazer. Aye. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Aye. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Hueso. Aye. Huff. No. Jackson. Aye. Lada. Aye. Leno. Aye. Leva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. Morrell. No. Wynn. Aye. No. Nilsson. No. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Roth. Aye. Runner. No. Stone. No. Vidak. No. Wachowski. Aye. Wolk. Anderson, no. Anderson, no.
Senator Mitchell moves the call. Members, we're going to now move to file item 94. Senator Liu, you prepared to bring this measure forward? Secretary, please read.
Assembly Bill 371 by Assemblymember Mullen, enacting to public social services.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Liu.
President. Thank
Great.
you. Thank you, Mr. President. This bill deletes the statutory requirement that a child's eligibility for CalWORKs program benefits in a two-parent household be based on the child's deprivation, which is defined as a parent's unemployment or a parent working fewer than 100 hours per month. Current law prohibits a two-parent family to qualify for CalWORKs if the primary wage earner is working over 100 hours a month, regardless of income. This rule assumes that a family working more than 100 hours per month would earn more than the income threshold. While this should be the case, unfortunately, it is not. This bill is a modest effort to support work and strengthen family unity for low-income families served by CalWORKs. The bill received unanimous support in the Assembly and Senate policy committees. There is no opposition, and I ask for your support on this bill.
Thank you, Senator Liu. Members, debate or discussion? Debate or discussion? Seeing none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. Aye. Bates. Aye. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. Aye. Block. Aye. Canella. Aye. De Leon. Fuller. Gaines.
Aye.
Aye. Galgiani. Glazer. Aye. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Wesso. Aye. Huff. Aye. Jackson. Aye. Lada. Aye. Leno. Aye. Leva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. Aye. Morrell. Aye. Wynn. Aye. Nielsen. Aye. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Roth. Aye. Runner. Aye. Stone. Aye. Vidak. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Wachowski. Aye. Wolk.
Senator Liu moves the call. Members, we're now going to recess until 1:30 p.m. for caucuses and committees. Oh, Senator Monning, for what purpose do you rise?
Under motions and resolutions, I'd like to move AB 870 to the inactive file. Also, at the request of the author, would like to move AB 648, item 91, to the inactive file.
The desk will note.
And maybe while I have the floor, under announcements, I know Chair Pavley has an announcement. I don't see Chair Mendoza on the floor. The Labor and Industrial Relations Committee will be meeting in room 3191 at approximately 1:15 after the committee announcement that Chair Pavley is going to be making.
Thank you, Senator Monning. Senator Pavley.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to alert the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Water to a committee hearing at 1 p.m. today, 1 p.m. today in room 3191. We have one item, so please be on time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And just to clarify, we'll be on recess until 1:30 for caucuses and committees. Thank you. To note that these votes will be on call, so we're going to do the roll call vote once, and then they're going to be we're going to move the call, and we'll get things going here. We're going to start with file item 95. Senator Leyva, pass on file. Okay, all right. All right, going to move to file item 97, Senator Bates. Not at her desk. File item 99, Senator Allen. File item 99. Pass on file. File item 100, Senator Stone. Not at his desk. File item 102, Senator Lara. File item 102. Secretary, please read.
Assembly Bill. Assembly Bill 1351 by Assemblymember Eggman, and act relating to deferred entry of judgment.
Senator Lara.
Mr. Chair and members, Mr. President and members, AB 1351 returns our current deferred entry of judgment system to a pretrial diversion system. Prior to 1997, California utilized pretrial diversion when dealing with the minor nonviolent drug offenses. Even though there was no evidence that a pretrial diversion did not work, the state switched to a deferred entry of judgment. Consequently, immigrants have been deported or denied U.S. citizenship simply because the immigrant pled guilty to an offense even though they completed a diversion program. Since 2008, over 250,000 people have been deported for nonviolent drug offenses such as possession of marijuana. AB 1351 allows for pretrial diversion to ensure that folks who complete their programming are not unnecessarily removed from this country. Under 1351, pretrial diversions is not automatically granted, but it is instead up to the judge to decide if the person would benefit from the process. For those reasons, I respectfully ask for your aye votes.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Lara. Members, any debate or discussion? Seeing none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. Bates. Anderson, no. Bates, no. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. No. Block. Aye. Canella. No. De Leon. Fuller. Gaines.
No.
No. Galgiani. Glazer. Hall. Hancock. Aye. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Wesso. Aye. Huff. Jackson. Lada. Aye. Leno. Aye. Leyva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. Aye. Morrell. No. Morlock, no. Wynn. No. Nielsen. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Roth. Runner. No. Stone. No. Vidak. No. Wachowski. Aye. Wolk. Wolk, aye.
Senator Lara moves the call. Now move members to file item 103. Senator Lara. Pass on file. Members will move to file item 104. Senator Pavley. Secretary, please read.
Assembly Bill 353 by Assemblymember Lackey, an act relating to fish and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Senator Pavley.
Yes, members, this bill was heard in the Natural Resources and Water Committee and obviously passed, and I'm here to present the bill on behalf of you. You know, it came out of a situation where there were a lot of fires followed by floods that left sediment in a creek bed, and it caused a lot of water to enter into Bouquet Canyon Road in a district adjacent to mine. and it required a very narrow exemption to the Fully Protected Species Act for habitat restoration purposes in an area of North LA County. The exemption created by AB 353 because of fire and flood problems contains very strict provisions that require the project to be conducted using some of the highest environmental standards for managing the take of a species. This bill was drafted in close consultation with the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee. Recent amendments have addressed lingering concerns from the environmental community. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Pavley. Members, any debate or discussion? Senator Runner.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. President, members. As a co-author of this measure, I rise today to speak in support. It's an important bill for the Santa Clarita Valley, which is part of my district. Current status of Bouquet Creek creates a public safety risk right now, and flooding often occurs on the adjacent road during heavy rains because portions of the creek are blocked. In addition, some private water wells near the creek have gone dry, and they are not able to be recharged due to the creek blockage. Bouquet Creek must be restored, and this bill paves the way for permits needed to begin the work. I ask for an aye vote as well.
Thank you, Senator Runner. Members, any further debate or discussion? Seeing none, Senator Pavley, you may close.
With both Senators Runner and Pavley supporting the same bill, ask for your aye vote.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for noting that. All right, we're going to, we're going to call the roll and close the vote. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Anderson. Aye. Bates. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. Aye. Block. Aye. Canella. Aye. De Leon. Fuller. Aye. Gaines.
Aye.
Aye. Galgioni. Aye. Glazer. Aye. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Aye. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Wesso. Aye. Huff. Aye. Jackson. Aye. Lada. Aye. Leno. Aye. Leva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. Aye. Morrell. Aye. Wynn. Aye. Nielsen. Aye. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Roth. Aye. Runner. Aye. Stone. Aye. Vidak. Aye. Wachowski. Aye. Wolk. Wolk, aye.
Secretary, call the absent members.
Allen. Bates. Bates, aye. De Leon.
Ayes 38, no zero on the urgency. Ayes 38, no zero on the measure. Members, we're now going to move forward on a few file items. Are we going to lift the calls? Okay.